this group that wanted to prevent Moi from automatically assuming the presidency in the event of Kenyatta's passing, they failed at the end because the succession clause prevailed. But now it takes us to the constitutionalist faction and other nobles. So a very important event is right after the demise of Kenyatta, that specific day, the 22nd. We see actors like the Coast Provincial Commissioner, Eliud Mahihu. And in the chapter, I chose to use the word noble because of the power that emanated from this position. And this is the provincial commissioner's office, which had been cemented in previous years by Kenyatta. And it was an office that was like the political eyes and ears of the president on the ground in his absence. And notably, after Kenyatta's death, Eliud Mahihu is believed to have told Moi that the eyes of Kenyatta have closed. Your Excellency, keep your eyes open. So I've just talked about the Kikuyu aristocracy, the constitutional faction, and the nobles. And the constitution faction is important because of Charles Jonjo, the AG then, and other leaders like Gigi Kariuki and Kibaki, who chose not specifically to lean on where they came from, but they chose to support Moi based on, should we say, the law, because they were looking at it through the lenses of what the Constitution said. So they did not want to rewrite the law in favor of ethnicity. And this is important because of the loyalty and timing for Moi, and also the fact that due to this, Moi was sworn in on that day at 3 p.m., still under the watchful eye of Chief Justice James Weeks. And just like that, there was like a curtain dropped on like the 12 hours of uncertainty. So just to in brief, we can see that this succession was not simply about handing over the baton of power. So we can look at it in 4 ways. It was a coronation shrouded in shadows. That is the 3 p.m. swearing in of President Moi. Secondly, the ethnic, more or less like a chess game, tilted by the competing aristocracies of then, the Kikuyu, the Kalenjin, the Luo. Thirdly, the law came into play, the Constitution, Jonjo's loyalty to the law of the land. And lastly, it will never be forgotten about the funeral, more or less choreographed by our colonial masters, the involvement of the British Empire on Kenyatta's burial.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll ask one question to David Masika. David Masika has done the chapter to us on the coup. From your findings and the evidence that is coming so far, was the coup organized by the military or it was organized by the government? Was it a kind of a weaponized coup Was it a coup that was perpetrated by seekers of power, including Raila Odinga and others who are accused of the same? What is it? What is coming out around the coup? Take two or 3 minutes. Yes, please.
Should I respond? Thank you, Prof. The coup, or the question surrounding the coup, is very complicated. And as I will speak to it minutes to come, there's a session I'm saying the coup that was never was, or the coup that was never was, or was it an unanswered question surrounding the coup? Why am I saying this is towards, before the coup, all the security agencies had informed the chief, by then the chairman of the joint staff, they had informed the army deputy commander, they had informed the head of state, they had informed the intelligence people that there is a rumor that there was going to be a coup. This is from the court records as per Major General Mwagiru. But then no one took it serious. Then the army units are sent to Turkana for war games. And Lieutenant Sawe orders all the barracks around Nairobi to remain closed, that no one should go in. And General Mulinge is reminded that there's a rumor that there's a coup, and he goes to Machakos. And they leave Nairobi as a shell. President Moi is reminded when he's in Nyeri that there's a rumor of a coup, and he says, leave that to the intelligence and the DMI. Now, those are unanswered questions. Was the coup real, or was it plotted? Even General Muhammad, that we sing praises of quelling the coup, trying to access Kahawa barracks was hell. They did not allow him until he threatened to shoot somebody at the gate for him to be allowed to enter into the barracks. So that leaves the question back to you and other scholars. Was the coup real or a plot? Thank you, Prof.
So this chapter, given what you've said, would you say that the chapter that you've authored on August 1 coup, did it work for or against the Moi, the young or nascent Moi regime?
It worked so perfectly if Moi knew. Why? Because it gives Moi the ground to start consolidating his power. First of all, the name of the Kikuyu, the powerful Kikuyu men, the aristocracy, members of the Kikuyu aristocracy, which I have in mind, the southern Kikuyus, who call themselves the Gatundu group, and the northern Kikuyus, the ones that she mentioned about the Chania, beyond Chania River, the northern group. They were so powerful at that time. And therefore, for Moi to consolidate his power was to create a room to cause a problem among them. Now, when the coup is done, the coup attempt is done, the name of Njonjo appears. And when the Njonjo name appears, then Njonjo has to be dealt a blow through the Njonjo Commission of Inquiry, which went on, but now Njonjo has stepped aside. At the same time, Moi uses that chance to call for grassroots election in Kanu. He wants to weed out any dissent voices against his rule within Kanu, and therefore he calls for grassroots elections in December. And for you to take part in those elections, one had to be cleared by the party. So that's who is going to be cleared. So it gave Moi an avenue to weed out the dissent voices. within the coup also, the Luo are mentioned. The Luos are mentioned. The Gikuyus are mentioned. And why the Air Force? At that time, people who joined the Air Force were basically those who had gone all the way to high school, and majorly they were the Kikuyu and the Luo who dominated the Air Force. Now, Moi starts purging the Kikuyu and Luo elite from the center. So by purging them, he consolidates himself. He gets now a chance to rebuild his base with the loyal men and women. He also, under the help of Kulei, Joshua Kulei, hatches a plot to silence the Kikuyu through their economic. So he steps on the Kikuyu economy through suffocating the coffee industry, which the coffee industry which they depended on so much. But then, in as much as he suffocated the coffee industry, you realize that the Kikuyu were so cunning, and therefore they found a way out through the milk industry. So they will start the dairy farming all over. They uprooted the coffee and started dairy farming. So in one way, Moi achieved, if it was that it was plotted, because one will wonder, if there is a rumor of a coup, why will you want all the military seniors to be out of the city and to go all the way to Lodwar? Lodwar is not Nakuru, where you would say you can recall them back. And no one is around, and the barracks should remain closed. No one steps out, no one comes in. And that's what Major General Magiru has argued always. If you check the court record, it says, we informed them. So he achieved what he wanted. Thank you.
So it is easy to more or less conclude that the coup itself paved the way for the rise of the men around Moi, and to transform Moi into the aristocrat. The head of, just to replace Kenyatta in terms of the way he was thinking. Is that a fair conclusion from your chapter?
Yes, because there are two ways which some scholars have argued that can create an aristocracy. Aristocracy through blood or kinship aristocracy, and that we saw it so strongly in Kenyatta's aristocracy. This is when he is building strong men, around the people. You see the people surround Jomo Kenyatta. They are either related to him through marriage or by blood. So you'll find that he created an aristocracy through kinship. But then McIntosh argues that there is another way through which somebody can create an aristocracy. This is when the king decides to empower economically the people he likes, so that they rise to the table. And if I may borrow what Achebe says, that if a child washes its hands, can sit with the kings on the same table. So I think the king can create his own aristocracy. And therefore, once this was left, because by having Njonjo mentioned the election, one of the things he wanted to achieve was to pit Kibaki against Njonjo, the two, then weaken the Gikuyu strength. Now, that gave Moi now to create his own Kalenjin aristocracy, keeping in mind that Moi does not rise from a prominent family. As Professor had asked it that question, Moi rises from a background. It's education that brings him, and that is another way of also creating another aristocracy, the educated elite, which you also mentioned when Dr. Ombongi was bringing up his bit. So generally, Moi achieved, it gave him a chance now to build his own aristocracy, people who are so strong around him, who were made very powerful, and therefore they controlled the state and they had the presidency here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I would simply say, those of you who have the book, if you skim through, just skimming through, what comes from that chapter, and I'm saying this for the purpose of stimulating discussion around it, because we want to get your views as well, is that the coup was not your natural coup. Yes, there must have been disenchantment among the soldiers, but it was allowed to fester and given space to germinate into a major coup. But it is its aftermath which is very important, because it helps to dismantle a very, very powerful Kikuyu aristocracy through those two things that he has mentioned. One is, of course, the political approach to disempowerment, and two, the economic disempowerment on the one hand, and empowerment of the desired segment. And that's how now we see the rise of Kikuyu aristocracy, and his chapter concludes eventually with the rise of the Kalenjin aristocracy that is mentioned there. So let me then thank Masika for that. You're not out of, you're still on the platform, because you will have to either respond to some comments or something that are going to come in the discussion. But let me get to Justus next to you. You're discussing political divisions, or inter and intra Kalenjin politics, and that seems to be taking place between 1988 to 1992. That's what you seem to be saying here. But in this regard, then, are you trying to say that the Kalenjin group that rose, what you can call the Rift Valley aristocrats, are they homogeneous, or they are divided? What is the nature? What are the internal dynamics of those who from the valley who came close to Moi, and the faces that now became the face of the Kalenjin aristocracy?
Thank you, Prof. I think from 1988, the Moi regime comes under substantial pressure and shocks, if you want, particularly with the infamous Mulolongo, that I think they had crafted to make it easy to decide who gets into the house as they passed the law way back 1986. But in subsequent years, it's like that brings about a new challenge. So many people are left out, of course, by design, and gradually an opposition is put together. So the 5 years, so to speak, 88 to 92, so much is happening and that so much puts focus on the Kalenjin aristocracy. Maybe we should talk about Kalenjin aristocracy, not the Rift Valley per se. I think the Rift Valley is much bigger, much more wider. We can stick to the Kalenjin aristocracy. So because of the challenges from the Mulolongo to the murders that were quite notable, from Julie Ward to Robert Ouko to Alexander Muge, and then to the collapse of the Cold War, and then to the pressure for reforms, and then the rise of the clergy, to the platform asking for reforms, and then to the rise of a number of lawyers, the likes of Paul Muite, John Amunwa, Kitobi Manyara. So a number of things are happening, and then now the focus now shifts, if you want, to the aristocracy. So the aristocracy was something that was built when Moi came in. As you said earlier on, Moi does not come from this pedigree family, or if you want, heritage. He comes from the Tugen. The Tugen amongst the Kalenjin are, if you want, part of the lowly kind of group. The premier social groups amongst the Kalenjin are the Nandi and the Kipsigis. So those dynamics play out. So Moi crafts, I think gradually, the moment comes in from 1978, that aristocracy, but it's all about the Tugen and the Keyo. You can call them the people of the valley or the Keyo Valley. So the pressure of 88 to 92, because of the challenges or the shocks on the regime and the possible threats to the hold to power, now brings out the dynamics at play in the aristocracy. So I can assume that initially, yes, there was an aristocracy that was being built from 78, and more especially from 1982 after the coup. But from 1988, now there is, if you want, reknitting and reweaving of that aristocracy. So Moi as a challenge here, or can I call them the members of that aristocracy, of balancing the equation. They are okay as the aristocracy to run the show within the Kalenjin world, if you want, and of course across Kenya. But now, because of the pressure, now they have to balance and make it look like it is part of the whole Kalenjin that's, of course, on the table when it was not. So it's a tricky balance, if you want, for those who are in, to be seen that everybody's on board from the Kalenjin want to consolidate the numbers, because I think they were seeing the potential of a big, breathing political battle in 1992, and that came to pass when the elections came in December 1992. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think it's a tricky balance that's needed that we're trying to achieve.
Yes, you have really answered the question, because what we wanted to know is that yes, a group has emerged to succeed the big Whigs, the Kikuyus. But what one would like to know is who these names are, which you have done, how it is constituted, and whether it's a homogeneous group or it is a divided group. That is important for our analysis, because why would this aristocracy fall so quickly after 2002? That's really the question. Why would it disappear? And in that regard, then that will set the background for other analysis when we get to the other chapters. So we accept from this particular point, from your analysis, that we have internal and internal Kalenjin divisions arising from here. But again, I think we in our weekly discussions or our discussions in our forums, we made this observation for the sake of those who are here, that traditionally the Kalenjins are organized into some hierarchical, not in terms of the people themselves, but the groups that go as subgroups. We talk about, are they 9 or 11? From the Pokot, Nandi, Kipsigis, there are 9. The nine groups don't occupy the same rank. I think in terms of prestige and whatever, the Nandis are on top of it. Yeah, let's say the Nandis are, but they also occupy also the best. They own a lot of wealth. They also own the most fertile lands. And two, they are warriors, because they come from, ethnically speaking and ideologically speaking, they come from the Maasai. So they're more centralized, unified, capable of waging war. They did wage war against the British for 9 to 10 years. And they were not defeated per se. It's just they were decapitated. Their leader was basically killed in a very cold blood way by the German soldier. So these are very proud warriors to date. And they gave Moi a hell of time when he was in power, when he was a deputy president or vice president. And they continue to give him a hell of time after. Next are the Kipsigis. Even today, I'm told, I'm sure they're here. If you are a Kipsigis elder and you want to participate in Nandi culture, mambo ya wazee, you'll have to produce some goat or cows, so that you are now initiated into it. So you have to be initiated into Nandism. Otherwise, you stay there as a Kalenjin. The Tugen are in the valley, but they're very strategic, because they are positioned among the Maasai, the James, the Pokot, the Saburus are also up there, and therefore they are very strategic group, even for the Nandi. And that's why Moi would get acceptance among the Nandi. But the Tugen are also, if you wish, the military superpower of the Kalenjin, by the virtue of their geography and also by the virtue of their experience. They are battle hardened. So they subordinate the Tugen, the Keyo, as their allies. And they are those who carry their bags and those who carry their guns, and where they hide when things are tough in the valley. So the relationship between the Tugen and the Keyo is very interesting. That you have to you have to understand it that way so that you can understand why Nicholas Biwott, Boynet, and all the key soldiers would come from there because of that loyalty at that time. But they're not there by their own rights. They are there as subjects because of that traditional loyalty. The Tugen didn't like the Marakwet at any time because the Marakwet are liberal, they have lethal weapons, and their geography enables that they are not captured. It's a very, very, very tough terrain in that place. And their arrows are worse than guns. They just need to scratch you and you are gone. You can be hit by a bullet. You don't have automatically to die. But if you are touched by by a Marakwet arrow, you are gone. Just being touched by it. Kuguzwa tu, but the bullet can graze you and you go on with your business. So they were feared greatly, and that level is there. The warrior for hires, the people who would do your wars at your will, are the Pokot, because they had large swaths of land from which they can hide. They can move from the south, from the east Baringo, all the way up to South Sudan, and that's their territory, and they are swift in their movement. So again, look at them that way. So that is now the power dynamics within the Kalenjin. And now Moi was supposed to heal an aristocracy from this group. Now you can see the difficulties and why I asked Ondigi that question. I'm bringing this because it's good to understand how difficult again it becomes to heal an aristocracy. Two, some of the conclusions that would be made, like Biwott and others had autonomy to take decisions as they would, and they were equal in power. You have to know the clients and patrons, and the Tugen are the patrons. I'm saying this because there are certain observations that are going to be made in the book, and you don't know where they are coming from. You ask the question, where is that coming from, and so on. So just as that, I think that's good enough. Then we can then open the discussion to the publication.
We open in addition to what Justus and David and Mukami and what the Prof has said. One very interesting thing, the period of the 80s and the 90s in Moi's administration was the phobia that Moi had for the intelligentsia class, particularly from the University of Nairobi. And during this period, you tied the coup and many other events that happened. He dealt with this group in two ways. One, there are those he dealt with by using corruption. There are those he dealt with by literally crushing and scattering them. And also, he tried to reduce the influence of the University of Nairobi in the politics of the time by opening many others. Wanafikiria ni wao peke yao, tuko wengi. Kuna vyuo vikuu vya university mingi. You know, so the power and influence of the University of Nairobi as the center of intellectual politics actually diminished mainly in the 80s and reached its climax in the 90s. And what is very fascinating in the University of Nairobi is that Moi had a way with historians. I don't know why. Particularly among the people he co-opted. As we speak, I've just received a message that Professor Ida Salim has passed away. Ida Salim, yeah, the historian. He was actually the chair of department when we were in undergraduate. I was thinking that he is among the people we could speak with. The last time I was in Mombasa, I'd approached Professor Muhyiddin, I'm sure you know, the political scientist, to link me up with him, but unfortunately is gone. He is actually among the people who were co-opted. He's credited to have written this book, African Nationalism, attributed to Moi. And then after that, he sort of got rewarded by becoming Kenya's ambassador and all that. The story of Benjamin Kipkorir is very well known, another historian. The story of Dr. Sally Kosgei is very well known, another historian. Dr. Yusuf Unsubo, same thing. Professor Chieng, same thing. I've always asked, Professor Mwansi, Professor Seka, what is it that Moi found in historians that he could co-opt them? There are those he didn't co-opt, like Mukarunganga, Diambo, and many others. Of course, there are those who played their cards very safely, like Professor Gott, very delicate balancing act. There were those who remained completely apolitical, like Professor Murioki and the rest. So you find that at that period, the educated class, particularly at the university level, suffered most in terms of removing them from the university, scattering them around, appointing them ambassadors, bankers. Remember, Benjamin Kipkorir was once an executive chairman of Kenya Commercial Bank, making them advisors and using them as elements within his campaign machinery. Thank you.
I think that fills in some of the details and the context that we may have missed. That it is not just, the regime dealt with all its enemies with one blow, enabled by the coup because of the role that the University of Nairobi played at that time. Remember, this is the only university at the time. Others are constituent colleges, and therefore you're able to deal with it. So I personally came to the university after the coup, and the coup enabled me to be the chair of Muranga University students as a result of the localization of the university politics, something that you missed, the ethnicization of university leadership. And not even ethnicization, atomization, when you begin to look at the multiple leadership within an ethnic group. That among the Kikuyu, I think my co-chair in the neighboring constituency was Rigathi Gachagua, who was the chair of the Nyeri District Students Association, DUSA, and I'm a chair of Musa. And out there we have Nganga Thuku as the chair of Kiambu, and so on, and Nakuru. So when we met as fiefs, Legion of Fiefs, representing our own districts, we felt very proud. And one of the advantages we had is to have breakfast with Moi, very early in the morning. And I remember I went to, I as the Muranga Fief, went for breakfast with Moi, with a Kericho Fief, who is the former speaker, and now our ambassador to Namibia. Who was his name? I remember him. The former deputy crack to the National Assembly. Yeah, whichever. Yeah, so we went for breakfast together as two regional chiefs and so on. The atomization of politics at the same time. So it takes more detail to arrive at how Moi pacified the others and how he also raised the others. But in also building the Kalenjin aristocracy, he paired up people. He paired up people in terms of like us young people would be paired with Kalenjin leadership so that we're going there. But even when you are going, you can tell who is senior and who is junior. When we were going there, my Kalenjin colleague from Kericho was more powerful than myself because he knows the rope in State House. I don't. I'm told which carpet not to step on because he has been there before. So in other words, it was more complex. It was more complex game of power than we try to imagine. So the crafting of that aristocracy or those ethnic aristocracy, and I'm sure it must have been the same with the Kenyatta. So we're going to again talk about that. But it's important to note that he is crafting an aristocracy out of opposition. Why was Moi so anti-intellectual? Because for his own entire life, he had to fight for the Kalenjin leadership against intellectuals, tighter to wet. for example, among others. Maligin Serone. These are very well-run people who, many of them are Nandi. And finally, and when you get this Cheragat Motai, he's also coming from these. And he had a problem at home with the intellectuals, which he found even more complicated with these rules and Kikuyus. So during the coup, he dealt with all these in one blow. And that's it. Yes. Let me open up. Yes.
Define this concept, aristocracy, a little more in a clearer way than it is in this document. Because the way I look at it is, I get a bit confused. So we need to define that. Secondly, all these things, for them to survive, they need all the support of different groups in society, including different ethnic groups. The question asking myself is, when you talk about Moi creating Kalenjin ethnic aristocrats, isn't it true that even Kenyatta did, not just among the Kikuyu, but also these aristocrats from other ethnic groups? That doesn't seem to be coming out very clearly in this. And yet I think it is important. I'm also wondering, the economic elite, you say here, is just defined by wealth or control of the state. Is controlled by other things, wealth, politics, and so on. What was the relationship between the economic aristocrats, those that have become aristocrats as a result of economic empowerment, and those that are actually politically created? Was there any link, connection between them as they engaged in the state politics, in this country? Not just during Moi era, but even other regimes as well. But I was also wondering, this is also captured in this document, this phenomenon of inheriting political office, at the family level. You have Kenyatta, his son becoming the president. You had Moi, Gideon was a member of parliament. The Haniris of this world, the Mudavadis of this world. There are many. How do you explain this? And how do you explain this phenomenon? It's a very strange thing.
Thank you, because that's really important. It touches at the heart. I'll say something, and I'll give Ken the chance to add to us. What we're missing here in this particular book, as I said from the beginning, for the sake of Catherine and Bogo and others who came later, we decided to leave three chapters out of the book. The first is the new introduction, the conceptual. Why? Because we don't want to make the book so heavy at this moment, because the concept is what we are driving more than anything else. But in our discussion at the University of Nairobi during the seminar, we came out clearly. So we have it here. And yes, that concept is discussed. But in a nutshell, this is what it entails. Now, you start by describing or discussing the British aristocracy. And definitely the British aristocracy and the Japanese aristocracy and the other European aristocracies are a bit different. The British aristocracy was known for its procedure, its precision, what you eat with what you dress, when you are going where, when do we wear the dovetail, when do we wear the three-piece suit. It is really, if you listen to the story of Diana and the Asian who wanted his son to be married to Diana, and why he wanted to be close to the aristocracy. It was all about the respect that the aristocracy has by virtue of its culture, how it fits, where the houses it stays in, and all that kind of thing. And therefore you might be lost in looking at one thing, because for the British, being knighted was as a result of having all these things: the culture, the behavior, the mannerism. And that's why those who did not meet the cut of the British aristocrats, who should stay within the purview of the Queen, were, quote unquote, allowed to go to migrate to Kenya. That's your Daramea. And when you do, as we have done, read their biographies, what they did, where they went, you find you not even if you're Queen Elizabeth, you not allow them within your vicinity. Yet once knighted, nobody can take your position. So they dealt with Kenya as a place of exile, just like they would deal with Australia, where they take the incorrigible criminals. They would now bring their aristocratic, quote-unquote, criminals to Kenya. So we have two concepts of aristocracy here. One, as it is in Britain, which is pure, and it is made of the status, the class, the heritage. Two, you can grow into the aristocracy by your achievement, like this man of Virgin Atlantic. So you are knighted. Or you can become one like Mugabe. You are given the order of birth, even though you are black, and so on, because you have made such achievement for the Rajam aristocracy. And you have what it takes, including land in Zimbabwe. You have everything that qualifies you. And you have the attitude and mannerism. Your accent, English accent, is impeccable. And therefore, you belong. And you are accepted as such. So what that meant is that a British aristocrat then would look for peers, even in the colonies. And the closest they came to a peers were those chiefs who had achieved that. Here in Kenya, Chief Jonjo, who had horses. Where other chiefs were going with the donkeys, for him he had horses. And he had learned how to brood horses for a long time. So I'm talking about Chief Jonjo. This other one was Mugane. I'm talking about Jonjo himself. So these are the people you look for peers. When they go to South Africa, they look for the peers, and India, and so on. So the British were everywhere looking for peerage and that kind of a thing. Now, so it's possible to be one by birth, or you can be knighted and become one. And that was important. Now, when it came to Kenya, this is where we are coming in. Had we stuck into looking for the British aristocracy and what makes them, I argue we would not be in the kind of mess we find ourselves in. This is the argument. We would not have been in a mess, because it would have been meant that we would be borrowing coverings from each other when going to parties, with bow ties and things that are decent. We would be watching after each other that you don't do the things we are doing. If your wealth is corrupt, we kick you out of the club where we go, and we make things difficult for you to be rich or even to make it within our society. And therefore we keep order, law and order, and common decency amongst yourself by virtue of the values and status you have established for that class. Our argument is that that's not what you find in Kenya. In Kenya, you find an aristocracy that is completely out of rails. What they are doing in terms of relationship between men and women, what they are doing in terms of abuse of substance, what they are doing in terms of violence. Instead of solving your cases through courts and dealing with these issues of, marital infidelity through the courts, you are solving them through the gun, and so on and so forth. And then you are not working, because aristocracies are supposed to be very hard working as a show. You are spending all the time on the horseback, on three-piece suit, and outside that you are in holidays. So that notion of aristocracy in the Kenyan context was not fitting into the ideal aristocracies as we know them out there. They are not models. But this is the only aristocracy Kenyans knew. These are the aristocrats Kenyans worked for. My grandfather worked for one of these happy men in Karao or Jororok area. And that's where my mother was born in one of those farms in Old Jororok. So would you blame my brother, my uncle, or my mother for aspiring to be a British? They take alcohol you are not supposed to take, but if you're a good servant and you're doing very well, two taskers will be sneaked for you, and you take, and you talk about them for ages, that I took the beer the white man takes. Or you're given a bottle of wine away from your Muratina, and so on. You feel very good. So by virtue of deprivation of some of the things that made them aristocrats, including growing coffee and growing tea, we aspired to do the same. The only people who were out were the chiefs. So if you can talk about nascent aristocrats within the African community, it is some of the chiefs around Kiambu who had achieved those things. And it's not by mistake that the Kiambu would emerge as the aristocrat, the top aristocrats of the Kikuyu. And in the neighborhood, they co-opted sons of chiefs. In Muranga, they took Chief Jiri. Remember, the Jiri's high school. He was at the top. And when the Kikuyus of Kiambu refused Kenyatta to go to Lancaster at the instigation of the British, Chief Jiri tell his son to step aside. And Kenyatta go to Lancaster as the MB for Kegumo in Muranga, not in Kiambu, Gatundu. Because these are how the aristocrats. Kenyatta himself marries from the aristocrats, from the Koinange, and then from Mohokos. So it's not by mistake. So the point is, they were looking for each other in all these places. Those who have one material and those who have power. Who have political influence. And therefore, when they start to copy, now for example, if you get to Kambani, the story we give in the introduction is that of the Kasina Ndo. When Kasina is approached, Kasina is hated by his brothers and relatives because he would take their wives by force and would do all things that the Kambas would not do. Now, when one of his brothers, step-brothers I think, decided to cut him, he cut his hands and he left him for dead. But it was because he was such a respected man by the British. They quickly took him to the hospital in London and nursed him, and he was given the new hand. Yours are gone, you are given new hands, and so on. But because he was so loyal, the governor asked, what can we give Kasina now he's retiring as a gift? And I think even the British were shocked. They expected Kasina to ask for land, maybe some cars, maybe some horses, or some material things. Kasina asked for the Union Jack to be raised in his compound every day. And would routinely get out to see the flag Union Jack raised. So the British moved the governor, or not the governor, I think the commissioner, moved from Nairobi to come and install the flag on Kasina's compound. And Kasina lived happily ever after with the Union Jack. What does that tell you about when we are talking about the aristocrats of the mind? Because that's the concept we are using. The aristocrats of the mind. You may not be an aristocrat, but you believe that you are one. You believe you are one by association, and two, you have been schooled in the manner and character of the British aristocracy. So you believe so. And if you talk to Nyandusi, Musa na Nyandusi, if you talk to all the chiefs, that's how they saw themselves. We are different. I say so because I was brought up in a family of the chief. Me not being a chief, but being a friend of the son of the chief. And we're talking about post-colonial Kenya. And when we go to Chief Jogu's compound, you see how people are organized, including those who serve tea, those who clean, those who do the farming. They are organized like a central farm. Even, I mean, we're talking about even now, that's how they are organized. So the concept of the aristocracy will not be difficult to define, because it's more about the aristocracy of the mind rather than the one of the status, class, and achievements in that respect.
Prof, let me give you just a few examples, very quick ones. Let me begin with the British settler that I like most, Lord Ewart Grogan. In a sense that I like studying what they did. Lord Ewart Grogan. Lord Ewart Grogan did not come from a very prominent British family. Then he migrated to Zimbabwe. He didn't make it in Zimbabwe. He came to Kenya and made it big in agriculture, in politics, and wealth, because he owned large chunks of land, coffee farms. Then he went back to Britain and wanted to marry from a prominent family of a lady called Gertrude Watt. Wakamwangalia hivi wakaona hii takataka inakuja kufanya nini hapa. So to prove to his in-laws to be that he was worth, he decided to walk from the Cape to Cairo. From Cape Town to Cairo. The man who walked across Africa to prove to his in-laws that he has certain traits that make him belong. And finally, he was allowed to marry Gertrude Watt. Unfortunately, she later died. But Lord Grogan built the hospital we call Gertrude Children's Home in honor of her. That tells you that, he acquired certain trappings, changed his class from one group to the other. The other one, look at the Kenyans who were among the very first to either work in the colonial civil service. The things they did, the trappings that they craved for, spoke of their admiration, to the colonialists. My father worked as those colonial agricultural assistants. That's why at home, tulikuwa tunamuita, we used to call him Momo Colony, because he took us through the straight and the narrow. As his son, you had to keep your shirt tucked in all through. Of course, there are some of my brothers who rebelled, by keeping their shirts out. There are those of us who were paid. You have to be in a certain way. I don't know, maybe you could tell us the story of your father as one of the earliest education officers. I'm sure you could see those trappings among them. That is really the concept that we are talking about, and the Canadian discusses it and calls it ornamentalism, symbolism, really, that the British presented to be able to belong, to be able to ooze a certain level of sophistication. I was cracking a joke when I walked in here. If you see the checked coat that I'm dressed in, and I almost pass like a retired British lord. The only thing I'm missing is brown shoes. They don't normally wear black. That's the only thing I'm missing. So I think that is the concept we are saying, that in Kenya, instead of taking the dimension of class, which Lord Grogan was grappling with, for us it took the dimension of ethnicity and patronage.
Why we may have an operational definition. I say this so because from what Professor Peter has explained is that of those who came to Kenya, there were social deviants, isn't it? So then the argument is it that social deviance that our political class or our own aristocrat borrowed from there. Then someone will ask then, which is the other one which was morally acceptable, like the preaching. Because we are two. We have the social deviants who came, Happy Valley and everything else, where our premise, that is where we are borrowing our definition for the term. Then I would ask, who are those who are morally acceptable? And in Kenya, do we have an example of that? So that we don't do a definition that cuts across the social deviants and those who are morally British, well-fined gentlemen.
As social deviants. And that's why you choose the place called Happy Valley. So among the earliest of the settlers who came here was Lord Lamere. And therefore he became the top aristocrat in Kenya. Two, he had the largest amount of land. The soy sabu lunch was the largest of all, even larger than Lord Grogan and others. And two, it offered a variety that the Grogans in Nairobi could not offer in terms of the, call it, animals and so on. And place to enjoy, quiet outside the urban life, So in a sense, it's good to say that there were some nice British, but they were lower in their status because the aristocracy has hierarchies as well. Those who are top, the queen is at the top of the aristocracy. Then you come down to those others who serve under. Now, remember there were also British soldiers, particularly after the First World War, and more increasingly after the Second World War, who were brought in. But it's the first, those who came in the 1930s. The Jews who have done extremely well elsewhere were around in as aristocrats. But the ordinary Jews were classified as Asians. So they were not allowed into this aristocracy. Because the Kenyans are very clear when you read some of their work, which I looked at the Kew Gardens, that the Kenyan white was clearly defined by way of comparison, that he or she is not like the Cape, right, who has become liberal, right? And it is not like the white in Durban, which is contaminated with Asians. And it is not like Zimbabwe, which has what they call the dirty white, the other lower classes, the Irish, the Scots, and other lower British classes. So it has to be pure. That was the essence. And if you are there and you are not pure, then you are there at the mercy of others. This is where our friend, the Brock, Abraham Brock was one of the most respected Jews. So he was part of the nobility, but he was not part of the Happy Valley. So what he did is to finance the Happy Valley because he was a financier. He was one of the richest. So whenever a member of the Happy Valley got broke, either through whatever, they would go to Abraham Brock for basically, becoming solvent. That's why the Jewish whatever temple or whatever it is, synagogue, is next to the university. Where you look at that place at the corner, where it's not touched. Now, so the long and short of it is simply this, that there were variations within, etc. But the group you call the Happy Valley was the most influential. At home, it was the highest rank, because it also depends on who you are associated with. For example, when you go to the Diana's family, I called the the Diana family are part of the Raja, they are very high ranking, which is why they would marry with the Queen's family, because they are very high. They don't live in Britain; they live in Cape Town, but they are very respected, and so to say. And as a result, it was possible. It was possible for one who is in Kenya to trace their line from a more person top. That's why they could maintain their life here, because they are more heirs of very serious estates and who came to spend their good life here in Kenya in that kind of freedom. So I think for us, what we're going to do in the book is which is not here. It is basically situating the Happy Valley in terms of what it was and the character of the aristocracy. And because that is the kind of aspiration which the African workers who were serving them as cooks, serving them as garden people, serving them as babysitters for some of the settlers who have babies, and all manner of things, looking after their cows, like Dramea's cows and so on. That is what they admired. And this is what they are going to keep after independence. It did not take a lot of time to transform the Murang'a peasants into farmers, growing the highest quality coffee in the world. Why? Because they had worked for the settlers. So what we know is that they carried the skills of coffee planting, tea planting. But what had they carried as part of the cultural import from the settlers? I think that's what we are looking at.
Okay, I think you have. I think what Daktari, Professor and Daktari are looking at is the actual. You have the conceptual definition, which we understand. Now, the operational definition is for you in your introduction to look at who are these characters in Happy Valley, and this is their characteristics. So when somebody is reading, he's able to tell these are the guys we are emulating. In the U.S., we call those who worked with the whites, the aristocrats, the house niggers. So this is what the house niggers were trying to emulate, and therefore by doing that, we also ended up creating our own aristocrats based on what they had seen their masters doing. I think that puts it a little bit more in the clarity as an operational definition. It makes it a lot clearer. Of course, you don't call them the house niggers, but
you realize that if you left all these top categories, so settlers, there were those who were a bit miserable ones who could not even find somebody to marry. You remember the story of Lord Egerton? Yes. Who came to really have a passionate hatred for women. And then finally, he died single. But there are those who have reinvented themselves, like Abraham Bloch of the Bloch Hotels, belong the Jewish but very highly respected among the white settlers locally here. So even among themselves, they are actually very interesting power hierarchies. Yes. We have.
No, I wanted to finish with that so that I can go back to Masika, and go back to the coup, because I really had a comment I wanted to make on the issue of the coup. I'm a student of chaos. Okay, I studied chaos theory, and in strategy, what do you say in chaos? All these things that look random, no matter the randomness, there is order. You just have to observe closely, and you discover the strategy. What you described are chaos that were created to a semblance of a coup that was happening, but there was so much chaos around that, the units that are supposed to respond are not in Nairobi. The general who is CDF is not in Nairobi. The president himself is not in the village, whatever he's doing. So with the sole purpose of crushing two communities which dominated the Air Force, the Kikuyus and the Luos. I was at the University of Nairobi in '82, the night of the coup. I was just telling her. And at midnight, we knew there was going to be a coup in the morning. As students, we knew. And it was funny because after that, when we finally managed to run away and I went back home, my brother, who was a senior superintendent of police in the northeastern province, he was at home. They came to pick him up in a chopper, and I was laughing at him, and I was telling him, "Hey, sasa simetolewa." In others, they told me that's nonsense. Which means there are other people, even in government, who knew it was a fake coup meant to create chaos enough ground the organization or redefinition of the power structure that Moi wanted to. Moi had to deal with three areas. Economic power, in the middle was politics. And he dealt with them at the same time. The economic power had to destroy the Kikuyu. They can be dislodged. But he needed another group of individuals who would replace Kikuyu, no matter how slowly they will do that, because the Kalenjins were not quite ready to do that. And that's the definition, in the narrative of this, where the Indians started taking over where the Kikuyus were left. Now, on the academic side, we saw what happened to the universities, the Mwakeja group and all that. It systematically destroyed the intellectual base of this country. And the only one that was left in the middle, which was the political power, and that he managed to do that within a very short period of time. Now, so he allowed and the same strategy happened in '92, and I thought you would capture that in 1992 when they conned Matiba to run so that he can destroy the opposition. If you look at the votes for Raila, Kibaki, and Matiba, they were almost twice what he got himself. Is that correct? With Jaramogi. So he almost got twice. They had almost twice the votes that Moi had. So he used the same strategy he used in '82, 10 years later, to remain in power. And those are things that I think are worth to. And this happened again in 2022. History repeats itself. 2022, the two ethnic communities that have been so divided since the colonial times, the Kikuyus and Luos, they got together. But then Ruto had to use the class narrative to defeat the two, and he ended up being in power. The rest is actually, the rest is history. The other thing, that's why I kept on saying about the issue of longevity in political power with these aristocrats is slowly destroying this country. If you look at the people who are in power today, apart from even Ruto included, they've been in power, they've been in government for between 20 and 50 years. So we have to think, how do we, as a country, and that's what was, in a time we have a fantastic book like this one. There's always something that I call feed forward. What is the book and then the intended intellect take home of the book? And looking at what we are looking at is, what is this book going to tell us at the end of it when we read? The aristocrats You have 3 generations of them, but it's either them or their children that are still in the same power play that we see today that we saw 40, 50 years ago. So how do we break away from that? And that's why I kept on saying understanding the generational psyche and the damage it does to the next generation is extremely important in order for us to break that cycle.
Thank you very much. We want to really appreciate the people who are participating online. We've 11 other people who are participating with us for just to share what we're saying here from the US, from the UK, from I think there are some out within Kenya, but outside. So we do appreciate them generally. But I think this is really enriching our debate. And thanks, Peter, for the comment. Because sometimes when you are coming up with a concept that can be that is potentially controversial, your safeguards are being very, having your nose steep deeply into some facts and some realities, and really acknowledging every reality that goes to define this. So for us, I think the critical part is the Happy Valley. But it's also important, as you said, to contrast the Happy Valley and the others who are not in the valley. Because not everybody was in that valley and was a dissident like that. I remember I traveled from London to Johannesburg in the same plane with a Muzungu, a white man. By the look of it, this was not a Boer or an Afrikaner, because that's the nature, that would be the case. This was a thoroughbred British person. And obviously, like everybody else, he thinks that the blacks are not people you engage so deeply. So we stayed together in the plane, the same seat, without him talking very much. Until then I removed Dan Branch's book, Hope and Despair. You remember the book by Dan Branch. And I started reading, and he saw the cover. And I said, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "I'm in Kenya." "Oh, I'm from Kenya." "Oh." Then he discovered I'm not a South African, because we're in the same plane headed to Johannesburg, and I'm black. So the general conclusion would be that I'm going there as a black. I'm going home to Soweto, possibly. But now he engaged me in a conversation, and it turned a little bit emotional, and not emotional, but nostalgic, very nostalgic. He said, "I was born in Kenya." Reminded me of Roger Whittaker. And I loved the country. I don't know why my parents chose to leave. But so I was, what do you do now? We are in the ship making industry, and they seem to be doing extremely well by virtue of where he was traveling and so on. So to cut a long story short, this man, of course, for the sake of Kenyan nationalism, he told me that if there's any country like Kenya God created, he kept it for himself. That's what he told me. That if there is another beautiful country that God created like Kenya, he kept that one for himself. In other words, the only beautiful land remaining is Kenya. That's according to him. Then, of course, he went on to tell me about Kenya and how he loves it. From that point on, there was nothing else we were talking about. We were really talking about Kenya. But you can tell from his family that he was not part of the Happy Valley, because he's not really. And the family did not leave because of anything. They left because they didn't want to get mixed up. They did not know how to deal with the blacks outside the context of the authoritarian colonial order. So most of them left for that reason. But others stayed on. The Riki family was not part of the Happy Valley. They're not mentioned in the Happy Valley. The Rikis. And they are part of the prominent Kenyan settlement. But they are not knighted. I don't think there is a Rodriki, all this. These were just good British doing their jobs among the Maasai and elsewhere, or anthropologists. So the long and short is that we take your comment quite positively as a contribution to that. Ken drew my attention to what you're talking about, the psychology of these, what you're calling chaos, the instrumentalization of chaos, because that's what you are talking about. This is what Patrick Darroze and Shabal are talking about, Africa Works. And Africa Works is basically the idea of the instrumentalization of chaos to get things going. He's drawing my attention to the years when chaos in Kenya is instrumentalized. 1982, the coup. 1992, you remember? We talked about that. And then 2022, what you have talked about. The 20s, the 22s, or the 2 at the end of everything is beginning to become suspicious. So I don't know what is going to happen in 2032. So, and Lonsdale, the chaos, yes. He talks, it's all about the unhappy valley and so on and so forth for them. So the rest of the British and those who are discussing the same subject we are talking about ourselves, and we are differing from them. They don't call it the happy valley. They call it the unhappy valley. Because the happiness which was happening here is an embarrassment to the British aristocracy. It was total deviance from what they would like to see. In fact, some of the text summarizes that they do what that is indecent to order or something. There's a phrase they use which echoes the biblical judgment about all people who fell from the eyes of the Lord. He fell from the eyes of the Lord and the consequence, and so on. So that's what we can say for now. David, is there anybody who had another question? Yes, Mary.
Thank you. On Moi, we have generalized him until he becomes like, first of all, we have said he's Soti, the small clan. Nobody knows much about it. He's from Tugen, nothing very much. What have we done with the Moi before 1963? They left, being the member of Regico, from being a teacher, representing and Rift Valley is not the one we know, it was larger than that. Had he not already created himself, so to speak, leader of the Kalenjin? For those times, I think he was in Regico for 2 terms. He participated in the Lancaster House meetings in London, was part of all this constitution that we inherited. Now, so do we just hold him as that one from Tugen? So do we hold him as that man from small Soti clan? And we keep on, kind of making him from small to this big. He had already become big before, and he had this interaction, of course, with so-called white man and all his doings. So even his dressing was not kawaida, as you know. So looking at Moi, I would want to see that introducing us to the Moi, not just that small clan, he had already cultivated himself as that aristocrat of the might. He was towering, not just his height, his vertical self. So the other thing is education, wealth, and these family connections whitened or created that aristocracy nicely, smoothly. Those connections that we talk about, so we need to tie, and the connections will not come from nobody to something. There was something that has been going on for a while, just to entertain ourselves. We have built houses, and all of us have tried to become aristocrats. You know that window that you have created between the kitchen and the dining? Did you ever bother to know why? It is a servant, and it is built in a way that you don't see the face and you don't see below. You only see here where the hands go, bring. And we have perpetuated it blindly, although you don't use them because there are no servants on the other side. You are not supposed to interact with the cooks. That's why even the quarters are behind the kitchen. They come from there to the kitchen, and you see food, you see plates disappear from that window. So we are aristocrats of the maid.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let me add something again on Moi. That Moi was a Kalenjin candidate during the Lancaster issue. He was there with somebody called Tomno. There were two candidates. Tomno, he was a Maasai, and Moi. So they needed one person from Rift Valley. And these were two candidates. So the Kalenjin coalesced around Moi. And who are these Kalenjins that coalesced around Moi? These are chiefs, prominent chiefs, Elijah Cheruyot and others. And these chiefs had been created by the colonialists. So there is a link between the colonial aristocrats and the Kalenjin aristocrats, who creates another aristocrat, Moi. Moi, as you said, was a teacher and had come into contact with many people, and including the British farmers. And you remember how Kadu came in. It was in line with the British farmers who were opposing Kanuside. And as you said, I talked to Burudi Nabwera on an interview, and he told me how he got his scholarship to London, that his scholarship was meant to understand the Mau Mau, the sociology of Mau Mau. So he got a scholarship, and he was a son of a railway master in Tarbo, and his name Burudi therefore comes from the Barut, the explosives. So he went to London, and as a student he receives Moi and the other Kadu boss, what was his name? Masinde Molero, Ngala. So Moi slept on his bed, and they were attending Lancaster conference. So that's how they knew each other. When later Moi came to power, Burudi Nabwera becomes Minister for Interior. So you understand these connections we are talking about. So he had built a base. Bases were built on a continuous line. So the two Kalenjin groups that supported Moi, the Kipsigis, in terms of population, the Nandi in terms of wealth, chiefs and so forth. So they accepted him. And the groups that helped Moi were pastors. Remember, Moi had a connection with the church, the Banets, which now turned to be Cabernet. So he had that missionary touch. During Moi's time, you can remember all his children are named after the royal Philip, who, you know, that connection. Yes, the naming. And all that. Remember that Kenyatta's funeral, Jomo Kenyatta's funeral, was planned in 1968, 10 years before he died. And the only other person who knew that was Daniel Arap Moi. This is in a document I've given Professor. So the British trusted him. He was trusted. And we have read from elsewhere that it is CIA who identified Moi to succeed Kenyatta. So it's all connections. So I finished that with Moi. But Moi, I want to say, he created the Kalenjin aristocrats for purposes of national wealth distribution. And he created broad-based groups from other ethnic groups for political purposes. Wakenamolo Motisia and so forth, Amoth in Nyanza and so forth. So, yes, Karaoke Chotara and so forth. So for political purposes. But the other one was for issues of wealth. Quickly saying something about the coup. Those of us who were already in high school, it was very scary, and you cannot imagine that somebody would have planned it to happen. And I also think you must answer the question, don't you think it is risky to say let a coup take place and then I will do something after that? You must answer that question. And then, the people who suppressed the coup were not Kalenjin, were not any other people. The most crucial people who suppressed the coup were Kikuyus in their videos, their YouTube interviews. So, tell yourself, what then were these Kikuyus that suppressed the coup and those whom Moi wanted to suppress? It looks like there's something more. Just give us that thing. On the question of the economics, I'm not trying to defend anything, but I was saying, yes, what was the situation before the coup? There was a lot of dissent. And around the economy, what were these people who were doing business, issues, what was the situation? And what was the world coffee market that time? Just think about it. That I'm trying to say that Moi continued relying on kingpins from other ethnicities, and it looks like this is a script that is going on all over. That always, we were told whenever you wanted something in Rift Valley, say you understand because you are from Rift Valley. Wait, we want to deal with the other people, give them support so that they support us. So, and I think that will happen to all heads of states who will come to power. You will always, these alliances. So the alliance, the Kalenjin alliance that brought Moi to power, the Kipsigis, the Nandi and the rest, that gave Moi a thinking or awareness that to survive, you need alliance from other communities. And so forth, and it has continued like that. So I think I finished Kenyatta's funeral and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think I have finished my point. Issues of, as I said, religion. Moi went to school in Kapsabet. He went to the mission in Kapsabet. The people who supported him were the prominent Nandi people. So he was one of them. All the time he was one of them. He was never looked as a token. Yeah. And that is because that time he was the most educated Kalenjin person when this position of Legico came in. So you think about it. And there's somebody I would really want you to involve in this. He's called Geoffrey Sang, and I think Dr. Yes. Yeah. Yes, so he would link these things nicely. Thank you.
Together. Thank you, Dr. Ambassador. It's very helpful. Now you can see the task we are up to, and you can now see why we thought this was important to have this kind of discussion. Because this is the kind of discussion you'd be having after the book is published. If you found this in the market, Yaya Center, and so on, and you bought, then you took it home and read. They will say, but not all settlers were criminals. no sort of from the Happy Valley, because the concept is not as tight as an intellectual like Peter would like to see it. It's not well interrogated in terms of all its substance as it is. So this is what we came here for, to ensure that we don't get into those pitfalls where you're introducing a new concept, but it's so weak to hold, and that nobody is going to follow it. And that's why we have psychologists here, like Dominic, to understand the psychology of the house nigger and the field nigger. The house nigger admires the lord or the leadership of the house, that when the mother of the house is sick, she doesn't say our mother is sick. She say we sick. You know, we are sick. Yes, if you listen to the Gone with the Wind, yeah, you watch the movie Gone with the Wind. Don't say that our mother is sick or our sister is sick. It is we sick. You know, and if they are happy, we happy. You know, so it's a collective ownership of that, because you are house nigger. The field nigger will have a different language. I say that buffoon is sick. Let him die. You know, and so on. So they're coming from different ideological positions. So I think what we are appreciating in Kenya is that it is not it is a mix. What we inherited is a bleed. Is a mix of the two. The happy valley and the other valley, the other settlers, because they had certain values, farming and all that. But it is the culture, the political culture of the Happy Valley, that has increasingly become dominant. Because from the Kenyatta years, where people are told that it is wrong to do this and that, when you listen to Kamaru's songs, they are all about our people drifting very quickly to the Happy Valley, and others warning them against going that way. Even because Kamaru will be telling the people in his songs, and you who are driving these Mercedes-Benz's, Toyotas, remember where we are coming from. Remember Kimathi, remember the others. And now your children cannot even speak Kikuyu. They cannot tell the difference between a goat and a cow. I mean, a goat and a dog. And they are wondering what is happening to this dog. This dog which is eating potato vines. You know, these are the lamentations of the 60s, because we very quickly drifted towards the Happy Valley. But we did not know that we were drifting to Happy Valley until we now come to 2013, all the way up to 2022, and now where we are. Then you begin to look at yourself and ask, who are you? You look at the ministry in the government, and instead of the logic of stabilizing the health, education and all, you are looking at the machines that you are going to import, the technology you are going to import to make $1 billion or to make $1 million. Not because it's necessary, but because it gives you the opportunity to make money. So in short, that's really, because history is written by those who are living, and they interpret the past from the perspective of what they are able to see. So the history we write is not for the past, it's for now. That's why I am, as a political scientist or a person teaching in the political department, I have no problem adding at 202. Why? Because the book, when you read it, is going to speak to you about today, because that's the interpretation. But we got the comment. I think it was said, and we got to sit down and see how we are going to do that. That you push it to the present, or you think about the second volume, but you wonder whether when you do the second volume, it's going to make any sense, or whatever it is. I think we have to consider whether you want to do 3 volumes: the Kenyatta, the whatever, and after the Moi, and after. Maybe you can combine all the others. Alternatively, you do a thorough job. But this was very specific for the Moi era. for the reason that we would want to see what kind of transformation take place within the Moi era, because there are certain things that have happened. That's why we have this name, the thing here. Why you have Lord and Lord Errol and what do you call this person? Bob Oko. Why do you have them? Because everything about them fit like how he was killed, why he was killed, and the theories around it. How he was killed, why he was killed, and the theory around it. They fit. Both are prominent people with wealth. And both are very strategic in terms of power, the country. So this is the Happy Valley in the 1930s. And this is the Happy Valley in the 1990s. Right? So you can see, how did we reach here? Because the theories I'm getting about why Oko was killed and who killed him are basically taking me back to that kind of life. And they have there is a prominent one that is in the law, but PLO Lumumba and others will give us interviews on some of those things. Just to but we have also talked with some of the people who are in the Throne Commission and others, and you've scored through the books that have been written on Oko's death by very, very close families, friends, and so on. And what you are coming up with is you need to understand the Kalenjin aristocracy in order to find out exactly what was happening. And finally, you talked about Moi as a creation. There's an extent to which he created himself. He walked that road to go to school. He would have decided not to go to school and look after cows. And he would not have been the Moi. So allow him there. Allow him. He would have married 20 wives. This time he married one. And when she disappeared, Moi stayed the way he was. Yeah. So the point is, we have to give credit to Moi. But you have snippets of information that you can rely on. For example, his trip to the United States as the leadership program, and the way he was introduced by Vice President Nixon to the men and women of the press, when he could not articulate himself the way Boyer was articulating himself, because Boyer was very, very eloquent, and his flair of language was impeccable. It's very different from Moi, who would stammer his way through English language, and you feel this man would be comfortable with another language other than the one he was speaking. Yet Nixon said, don't look down on him. This is the future leader of Kenya. You're talking about 1964, and 1964. It is written, and I have that book in the house, the whole text of how he addressed the journalists to tell him about that. Two, when you read Dan Branch basically let the cat out of the bag by basically going back and saying how they had helped Moi to reach the site 78 and all that. He talks a lot around the issue, and if this is something you are investigating, then you get your evidence very, very quickly from there. Obviously, the idea of the Kikuyu aristocracy, when it got divided during the constitutional process, they changed the constitution business, the aristocrats were on the side of Moi, the Boya, the Jonjos, the Mahehus, and others. Except now Bio Koinange, who from the beginning, the Koinange family has been the rebel aristocrats. Yeah, from the father Koinange to the children. They were not what you can call pro-British kind of aristocrats. So when Bio Koinange was in exile, he never went to Britain. He went to Ghana immediately after Nkrumah. Nkrumah's party became big. So he did not go there for exile. He went there. Now, the point here then is simply that Moi himself was very, very closely connected with that. And they are the ones who told him that Moi has died, Kenyatta has died now rush and take power. And without the Mahehu, and that's what Mahehu discloses in his recent biography. And actually says that Kenyatta did not die of what people say. He died because of lack of oxygen. They were too busy to remember to top up his oxygen, things. And they knew he had a problem. He needed oxygen. No, that's not me. It's Mahehu saying it in his new book. And that's very different from what Jiro is writing in his book about Kenyatta, who was there and who was not there. Partly what Jiro is saying is correct, the theory of absence of those who would have helped him. But the real cause is that even if they had gone where they were going and they had left him with enough oxygen, then it would have been very okay, and so on and so forth. So he relocated to Mahehu's home, according to him. He relocated to Mahehu's home. But it's very interesting. So he leaves State House and live in Mahehu's home. But why is that the case? That's in his book. Why is that the case? Because that's where he's getting care. But then Mahehu also happened to be sympathetic to this other side. That's why he's part of the very few in the Kikuyu Kenyatta era aristocracy who would serve in Moi's government and become part of the very, very inner core of the Moi family. I mean, the Moi presidency for a long time. So I think we've done a good job. Thank you all. Thank you very much, Orkoyot, for the inner thing. And we are going to rely on you. Because the last thing you want to do is when you are a man from the slopes in the west and a man from the slopes in the east, then you pretend that you are going to write about other people from an expert perspective. So I thank that girl, Cherop, who has been very, very helpful to us in terms of putting us on the rail about what is happening. Because in Kenya, you've got to really respect that there is that inner information which you cannot get unless you have a friend like this one. We've grown up together. So even though I will not say where I got the information from, I know I'm not far from the truth. That's the most important thing. You're not cooking your own things in your kitchen and putting them as a book between two covers. That would be immoral. So I would invite us to lunch. We're going to hurry very quickly in the afternoon because we want to leave this place by 4:30 or latest 5 because we've already taken some time. So we'll have our lunch. I think it's served within here. We're not going to go very far, I think. I'm not sure we're going to go far. Yes, we're going to go up. Oh, okay. It's a nice walk since we've been seated the whole morning. And after that, we'll come down to this pristine place, enjoying this jungle. Remember, there are no hyenas here. And just nice. No, our lions will deal with them. So thank you. And let's let's clap for those who have done a good job. Masika, Ondigi, Asumpta, and thank you for that. And the comments from Peter and colleagues, Stephen Gachie, we really appreciate this and the argument. Dominic and Mary, is a wonderful comment. Yeah? Yeah? And Stella. No, there are two theories. Moi was a creation, but there's an extent to which he created himself. So he also aspired. By the way, before we leave, do you know that Moi was the best in dressing? And he took time to dress. Yes, you said so. His tie matched very well, and his flowers and everything. The only person who was close to him, he was better than Jojo. Even his choice of ties, he was way better than Jojo. Jojo was just one spin strip. Jojo. No, not all the time. When you go to the clubs, you find they wear according to the time. When they are going to look for land, this is how they dress. This is a typical aristocrat.